In Part 1, we established the foundation. The Stoic woman is not a performance. She is not a brand. She is not a version of strength designed to please anyone. Not the traditional version, not the modern version, not any external version at all. She is a woman who has taken complete responsibility for the construction of her own character, and who maintains that character regardless of what the world around her demands she be instead. That foundation sounds simple. Living it is not, because the world does not stop pressuring you the moment you decide to stop listening to it. The pressure continues, the demands continue, the voices continue. What changes is your relationship to them, and that relationship changes through practice, specific, daily, demanding practice. In Part 2 we cover the principles, the actual practices that build the Stoic woman from the inside out. Not theory, not philosophy as an academic exercise. Philosophy as a weapon you pick up every single morning and use against every force that tries to tell you that your worth comes from anywhere other than within yourself. If you want the complete practical framework for building a Stoic woman's character one principle at a time, subscribe and hit the bell. Because after Part 2, Part 3 covers the modern application, how the Stoic woman handles relationships, criticism, social media, ambition, and loss in the specific world you actually live in. But first, the principles. The first principle is what Epictetus called the discipline of desire. He taught in the Discourses, recorded around 108 AD, that the primary source of human suffering is desiring things that are not within your control. This applies to everyone. But for women in the modern moment it takes a specific and particularly destructive form. The desire for a specific body that the culture currently defines as beautiful. The desire for a specific relationship status that signals value to others. The desire for validation from social media, from partners, from peers, from anyone whose approval feels necessary for you to feel adequate. Every one of these desires places your peace in something outside yourself. And everything outside yourself is by definition not within your control. The body that the culture finds beautiful changes every decade. The partner who validates you can leave. The followers who approve of you can unfollow. Your peace, if it's located in any of these things, goes with them when they go. The Stoic principle is not to stop caring about your body or your relationships or your work. It's to stop requiring external conditions to be a certain way before you allow yourself to be at peace. Train your desire toward what is actually yours, your effort, your character, your responses, your standards, and the things outside yourself become genuinely enjoyable when they're present, and genuinely survivable when they're not. The second principle is the discipline of judgment. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, in passages dating to approximately 170 to 180 AD, that the pain caused by external things is not due to the things themselves, but to your judgment of them, and that your judgment is something you have the power to revoke at any moment. This is one of the most practically powerful ideas in all of Stoic philosophy, and it directly addresses one of the most common patterns in how modern women are taught to experience their lives. The criticism is devastating, the comparison is crushing, the rejection is unbearable. These assessments, devastating, crushing, unbearable, are not descriptions of the events themselves. They are judgments about the events, and judgments are yours to make. A criticism is information about how one person perceives you at one moment. The judgment that this information is devastating is a choice, one you may have made so automatically for so long that it no longer feels like a choice, but it is one. The Stoic practice is to catch the judgment in the moment it forms, examine it honestly, and ask whether it is accurate and useful. Most of the time it is neither. The criticism may be completely wrong. Even if it's right, your character is not destroyed by one accurate observation about something you need to improve. The judgment that it is devastating is the problem, not the criticism itself. Training your judgment, examining it, rather than accepting it automatically, is the second principle of becoming a Stoic woman.
The third principle is what Seneca called the practice of self-examination. In his letters to Lucilius, written in 65 AD, he described examining the whole of each day before sleeping, going back over everything he had said and done, hiding nothing from himself, passing nothing by. He asked himself 3 specific questions every evening. What did I do today that went against my own standards? What did I do today that was consistent with who I am trying to become? And what will I do differently tomorrow? This practice is not self-criticism in the modern sense, not the spiral of negative self-talk that most women have been trained into, not the endless rehearsal of every mistake and inadequacy. It is self-examination, honest, clear, and brief. The distinction matters enormously. Self-criticism is emotional and recursive. It goes around and around the same failures, generating more suffering without producing any change. Self-examination is analytical and forward-looking. It identifies what happened, assesses it honestly, and uses that assessment to inform tomorrow's behavior. A woman who practices self-examination knows herself more accurately than any external assessment could tell her, and uses that accurate self-knowledge to make deliberate improvements rather than performing improvement for an audience that cannot see inside her anyway.
The fourth principle is voluntary discomfort, and this is where Stoic practice most directly contradicts the comfort and self-care culture that dominates modern conversations about women's well-being. The Stoics believed, and modern psychology increasingly confirms, that a character built entirely on the removal of discomfort is structurally fragile. When discomfort arrives anyway, and it will, a person who has never chosen to experience discomfort has no developed capacity to navigate it. Musonius Rufus was explicit in his lectures written around 70 AD that women as much as men need to practice endurance, physical and psychological, not because suffering is good, but because the capacity to endure difficulty is essential to a genuinely good life, and that capacity is built only through practice. What does this look like in practice for a woman in the modern world? Choosing the difficult conversation instead of the comfortable silence, pursuing the work that genuinely matters instead of the work that is more likely to be approved of, setting a standard and holding it even when holding it is socially costly, sitting with discomfort, physical, emotional, or psychological, without immediately reaching for the thing that relieves it. These are not extreme practices. They are manageable, regular, deliberate experiences of difficulty that build the capacity to handle difficulty when it arrives at a scale you didn't choose and can't control.
The fifth principle is what Epictetus called acting, from character rather than from circumstance. He was precise about this in the Enchiridion, written around 1205 AD. Your responses to events should be determined by the kind of person you have decided to be, not by the specific features of each situation as it arrives. This sounds obvious. In practice, it is one of the hardest things a human being can do, because every situation comes with its own emotional weather, its own pressure to respond to the specific features of this moment, rather than from the stable ground of who you are. The person who insulted you in public makes it feel appropriate to respond publicly and harshly. The partner who withdrew makes it feel appropriate to pursue more desperately. The rejection makes it feel appropriate to lower your standards in whatever way might prevent the next one. Acting from character means responding from your standards rather than from the emotional atmosphere of the moment. It means asking not what does this situation make me want to do, but what would a woman of the character I am building actually do here? Those are often different questions with different answers. The Stoic woman has decided in advance what kind of person she is, and she uses that decision as her compass when the emotional weather of specific situations tries to push her in a different direction.
The sixth principle is the clear-eyed relationship with attachment. Seneca wrote in his letters that we should love everything we have the way a traveler loves a beautiful inn, appreciating it fully while never forgetting that you will move on. This doesn't mean loving less. It means loving without the possessive demand that the thing loved remain exactly as it is forever. Applied to relationships, this is one of the most psychologically liberating ideas in Stoic philosophy. A woman who loves her partner fully while understanding that the relationship is not guaranteed, that the partner is not hers to own or control, that the continuation of the relationship depends on the free choices of two people neither of whom can be compelled. That woman loves more honestly and more sustainably than one who has fused her identity so completely with the relationship that its potential loss feels like the destruction of herself. This is not emotional distance. It is emotional clarity, the ability to be fully present in what you have without making your fundamental stability dependent on its continuation. The Stoics called this loving with reservation, loving fully while holding the outcome loosely, because outcomes are never entirely yours regardless of how much you invest in them.
The seventh principle is what Marcus Aurelius described as the practice of the present moment, not as a philosophical abstraction, but as a daily discipline. He returned to it repeatedly in meditations because it required daily returning. He was the most powerful man on earth, with access to every pleasure and comfort the ancient world could provide, and he still needed to remind himself daily to be where he actually was, rather than where his mind was pulling him toward the past that couldn't be changed, or the future that couldn't be guaranteed. For women in the current moment, the pull away from the present is specific and powerful, the comparison to where other women are in their lives. The anxiety about where you should be by now, the regret about choices made and not made, the fear about what comes next. All of this is time spent somewhere other than where you actually are, and where you actually are is the only place where anything can actually be done. The Stoic practice is to notice when you've left the present and return to it, not once, not perfectly, but repeatedly, daily, as a trained discipline, rather than a natural tendency. Your natural tendency is to leave. The practice is to return.
Here is what these 7 principles produce when practiced consistently over time. Not a life without difficulty. Not a life without loss, or rejection, or failure, or pain. The Stoics never promised that. What they produced in Portia, in Marcia, in Aspasia, in every woman who practiced this philosophy seriously, was a self that remained functional and recognizable and genuinely her own through all of those things. A woman whose sense of who she is does not depend on external conditions being favorable. A woman who experiences difficulty without being defined by it. A woman who can be fully present in her relationships, her work, and her life without losing herself in any of them. A woman whose character is the most stable and reliable thing in her life, more stable than any relationship, more reliable than any circumstance, more enduring than any feeling. That is the Stoic woman, not a character you perform, A person you build, one principle at a time, every day.
Part 3 drops next week. We're covering the modern application, specifically how the Stoic woman navigates the things the ancient world couldn't have anticipated, social media, and the comparison economy, modern romantic relationships, and the fear of ending up alone, ambition in a world that still hasn't decided how to respond to female power, and loss in all its forms. Subscribe and hit the bell because Part 3 is where everything we've built in Parts 1 and 2 meets the actual world you live in, and that is where the practice either holds or it doesn't. See the game, control the game,